This is 5 in 10 from Skywatch TV for January 27th, 2020. I'm Derek Gilbert. Topic number 5 today, of course, the coronavirus. This weekend, it sort of exploded into public consciousness. The latest numbers, which will no doubt be obsolete by the time you see this, and probably inaccurate to begin with, because we're not confident in the figures that we're getting from the government of China. Nearly 2,800 cases confirmed, 81 deaths so far. Thailand and Hong Kong, each reporting 8 cases of infection. The U.S., Australia, Taiwan, Macau, 5 each. Japan, Singapore, Malaysia have 4 each. France and South Korea, 3 each. 2 in Vietnam, 1 each in Canada and Nepal. No deaths from this disease reported outside of China at this point. Chinese health officials say the virus is mutating and is transmittable through human contact. 2 scientific analyses of the epidemic say each person infected can infect between 2 and 3 other people. That's what's called the R0 value, which some put as high as 3.8, which means one infected person could infect as many as 4 other people. And for a disease like this, that is, in the words of Harvard epidemiologist Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, thermonuclear pandemic level bad. Because the incubation period on the disease is up to 2 weeks, meaning people can be transmitting the disease for up to 14 days before they start showing symptoms. The mayor of Wuhan, China, over the weekend confessed that his team had not released information about the situation in a timely manner. He hinted that he had not been given permission to do so. He also disclosed over the weekend that up to 5 million people in Wuhan left the city before it was put on lockdown last Thursday. According to one simulation run less than 3 months ago, things could get much, much worse. Eric Toner, who's a scientist at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, ran a simulation of a global pandemic involving the same type of virus, a coronavirus. The simulation said that nearly every country in the world would have this virus within 6 months. The simulation showed flights canceled and travel bookings falling by 45%, which obviously has economic implications, stocks, fuel prices, just the ability to transport goods and services. And, of course, this is made worse by people disseminating false information on social media. There's a lot of bad information out there. Global GDP, according to this simulation, fell by 11%. Stock markets falling 20 to 40%. In other words, a disease like this has more implications than just health of you and your family. This could send the world into a global depression. The bottom line, Toner's simulation predicted that a virus like this could lead to 65 million deaths within 18 months. File that number away for a moment. We're going to come back to it. Topic number 4, how did all of this begin? So far, most of the stories dealing with the beginning, the origin of this Wuhan coronavirus, point to the seafood market in Wuhan. What's really more of what's called a wet market, where a wide variety of animals, including wildlife, are sold as food. And some of these animals have been responsible for outbreaks in this past, like a previous SARS outbreak that was traced to civets, which is a mammal that about the size of a cat, that nocturnal mammal that is known as a reservoir for this type of coronavirus. The assumption has been challenged, however, that it began at this seafood market or wet market by a report in the British medical journal The Lancet. The paper, which was written by a large group of Chinese researchers, said that so patient 0, patient 1, became ill on December 1st, which was earlier than had previously been reported. But this patient had no reported link to this particular food market. In total, 13 of the 41 earliest cases had no link to the marketplace either. And the data in the Lancet's paper also raises questions about the accuracy of the data originally reported by the government of China, which brings us to this data point. Last August 7th to be exact, I reported this. On March 31st, according to the CBC, scientists at Canada's National Microbiology Lab shipped live samples of Ebola virus back to Beijing on a commercial Air Canada flight. Now, bear in mind, Ebola is a level 4 pathogen, one of the most dangerous in the world. And that means it's supposed to be handled with the highest level of biosafety control. I don't need to tell you that flying on a commercial jet is not exactly the highest level of biosafety control. Well, 2 months after the samples arrived in Beijing, the Public Health Agency of Canada referred what it called an administrative matter to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The 2 Chinese scientists were escorted out of the National Microbiology Lab. Security clearances revoked. No charges filed yet. We're still not clear as to what they were trying to do by shipping live Ebola virus back to China. Now, over the weekend, Bill Gertz of the Washington Times reported on a 2015 broadcast by Radio Free Asia, in which they reported on a televised report in China about the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's the only site in China rated as a BSL-4. That is the highest biosecurity safety level. The only laboratory capable of working with deadly viruses like Ebola, Marburg, and these deadly coronaviruses like SARS. Gertz quoted Danny Shoham, who's a former Israeli military intelligence officer who studied Chinese biological warfare, and said this institute in Wuhan is linked to Beijing's secret bioweapons program. Mr. Shoham holds a doctorate in medical microbiology, so he is somebody in a position to know what he's talking about. He was a lieutenant colonel with Israeli military intelligence between 1970 and 1991, a senior analyst for biological and chemical warfare around the world. China denies having any offensive biological weapons, but the United States Department of State issued a report last year and said it is suspicious of covert biological warfare work in China. Here's the relevant detail. The simulation at Johns Hopkins University that ended with 65 million dead was based on a coronavirus modified with a virus called Nipah. Now, Nipah usually harbors inside bats and pigs. In pigs, it normally just causes a mild disease. But if you watched Sci Friday for any length of time, you know that viruses are transmissible and diseases between pigs and humans. Not often, but it can happen. She's been watching avian flu, H5N1, H5N2, and it's spread through China. China also dealing currently with an outbreak of a hemorrhagic fever in pigs. When it is in pigs, it's generally just a mild disease. But in humans, the Nipah virus can kill as many as a third of the people that it infects. The mortality rate up to 1/3. For comparison, the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919, which killed an estimated 50 million people around the world, the mortality rate of the Spanish flu is estimated at between 2.5% and 5%. Now, the thing is, Nipah is not easily transmissible from human to human. But, again, the simulation run by Eric Toner at Johns Hopkins postulated or based it on a hypothetical coronavirus modified with the Nipah virus. Now, what I didn't mention in August of last year, because, to be honest, I had never heard of it before, was that there was a second sample of live virus that was shipped from Winnipeg, Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory, to Beijing. Besides Ebola, the other sample of live virus was Nipah. Now, does this mean that the Wuhan laboratory is responsible for it? We don't know. We don't know. But when you put these puzzle pieces together, that live virus was sent back to Beijing, that Beijing is suspected of working on a bioweapons program, which would have been conducted at this laboratory in Wuhan, which is ground zero for this current coronavirus outbreak, the picture begins to look somewhat disturbing. Now, we can't go beyond speculating, and we won't do that here just to get clicks. But this is what we know. This is what can be documented from credible open source intel, news sources available online for anybody who wants to look, and using a little discernment and relying on people like Sharon, who have a background in molecular biology and understand the science of what's going on here. Time to panic? No. But be prepared. Masks, water, medical supplies, always a good idea to have at home because you never know. If it's not this, it may be something